Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Content Warfare TV. Today, I am joined by Demian Farnworth, the Chief Copywriter at Copyblogger, but most importantly, just a pretty cool dude who is fun to have a conversation with, has his own podcast with one of our recent guests, Jared Morris, and somebody who I know that will be able to nerd out on super hard all things copywriting, content marketing, content creation, and we got a lot of cool stuff to discuss. Demian, what's going on, man?
Hey, great to be here, man. I always love your show, so I appreciate it. And hello, everyone.
So it was funny, we were talking about in the green room before we went live today that Demian, this is actually his second time on the show.
Yeah.
And he was way back, and I didn't have a chance to look it up, but like in the 20s or 30s of episodes. And this is episode 108, which is pretty incredible. One, that I've made it this long, and two, that it's been so long since we've actually had a chat, because I feel like we mix in social so much that it's almost like, you communicate, you keep that conversation going, which is a really interesting part of what we do.
That's quite a feat for you. I think that's something to be proud of too, because that's one a week that you've done, So right?
Yeah.
And which takes effort and takes time, and there's a lot that goes behind that. I know that's that sort of commitment, keeps me away from a lot of things like that. So good for you, man. And you're always quality. I remember the show, and I remember getting off that, and it was like this was probably the best interview I've ever done. It was you do a good job at it. So.
Oh wow, well that means an awful lot to me. It definitely does that. So I've said a lot. I love to write. I love to do video, that kind of stuff. This is the only form of content creation that if you took this away from me, I would feel like a part of my soul was ripped out. It's just something about interviewing and having these conversations and just like I'm always excited for like what little nugget am I gonna get out of you today that you weren't expecting to give me that like is gonna blow everyone away, and there'll be one at least. Hopefully more, but it's like that just gets me so excited every time I do these conversations.
I came away from the interview and I was on to you because it's like, here's what Ryan is doing. It's like he is getting mentors for free, right? I mean, he is basically hiring all these people, getting this advice, because you get 45, uninterrupted minutes with these people to ask them any question you want. Which, if you look at their, their fee page, it's somewhere in the hundreds to get that sort of time with them. So. Good for you.
Well, it was funny. You called me out on your Copyblogger a couple of days later. I said,
well, I figured,
"Going on my spot, man." No, I'm just playing.
Right.
That was funny. And I do. It is that, and it's kind of like. So this is what I've always said about this, and I don't want to talk about me. We're here to talk about you, but I think this is interesting because you have your own show. You feel a responsibility to your audience, right? Like. The lead. You guys did this really great. It was like 11 or 15 episode, episodic thing, and fantastic. Anyone who is interested in the basics of really great copywriting needs to listen to the first 11 episodes of The Lead, the podcast. Absolutely fantastic. I'll have it hooked up in the show notes if you don't just want to Google it. But you guys have brought it back. And I'd have to assume that part of that is you feel some sort of responsibility to the audience. You've created such great content and all these people. Was it part of that? Like, what brought The Lead back?
Well, I think, part of it, we enjoy doing it, and we wanted to keep it going, but also we recognize that, we live in a world where fewer and fewer people are actually reading. They're more listening. Podcasts is sort of this is its moment. Podcasting is its moment, audio is its moment, because unlike video, unlike reading, you can listen to an audio anywhere, right? You can listen to it on your commute, you can listen to it on a run, you can listen to it while you're cutting grass, not so whether reading or that. So we knew too that we wanted, like you said, a responsibility as content producers and as writers, and as wanting to teach people. This is just a format we knew that we needed to keep doing. The thing too is, as you probably recognize, this is like with podcasting, you can talk about something that you've covered before. Like you can cover evergreen topics. You just put it in a different format, and so it allows you to execute on a tactic, an idea in a different format that brings that new. And plus, what we like to do, at Copyblogger too, is what we did with the 11, the 11 ingredients to a blog post. was we already had written the content, then we created the infographic, then we did the podcast, and so on each of those posts, we'd link to the podcast and say, listen, if you want to learn more, go to here. So we sort of allowed us to expand on that particular topic. So we knew that we needed to continue to do that with a lot of the content still back there.
Yeah, and so you get me right into kind of the meat and potatoes of what we're talking about today, and that is, how do we stand out today? So we were talking about in the green room, just so everyone kind of gets up to speed, who's either here live or listening in the future. Content Marketing Institute, Joe Polizzi, Brian Clark, your boss. Everyone kind of agreed who is in this space that 2013 was really the coming out party for the term and maybe the overall general concepts of content marketing, whether you use that term or not. And then that is carried right into 2014 and has now maybe become mainstream. I think we could probably agree that to a certain extent, these tactics, this idea of building an audience has become mainstream. That being the case, what you just described to me, this repurposing thing, that is one of the ways that your organization stands out, right? You have this incredible ability to look at a piece of content and say, here are 2 or 3 other ways that we can deliver this that will be beneficial to maybe a different segment, or give someone who's already seen it one way a little deeper understanding. Maybe not necessarily, we don't have to get into repurposing right now, but I would love for you to start on kind of, what does it mean to stand out today? What does standing out mean in today's kind of digital marketing world?
So I think, we all understand, like we live in an attention economy, and so we need that. And so what we do, standing out, is basically we all begin at the bottom. We all begin at the same place. It's an equal playing field. None of us really have an advantage over the other, and so anybody can come in and do. I mean, the challenge with that is, of course, coming over that. The good news is that anybody can overcome it. And as far as standing out, it's like, for me, the process has always been perseverance, just continuing to going into learning and figuring out, like. So I'm always keeping my eyes up above, on the horizon, around me, paying attention to what's going on, what are people creating, and like one of my biggest fears is looking like everybody else. That's like not what I want to do. I always fear like getting stale or routine, and so it's always, I find myself putting myself in dramatic situations where I'm like, okay, you have to change this so you don't keep on going down this, because eventually that path becomes a rut, and that rut becomes stagnation, and then it could be early retirement, and that's just not the way I want to go. And so I think you have to be courageous, and you have to be okay with saying, hey, listen, I've done this has worked really, really well for me, but I've sort of exhausted that. Now I need to go explore this other area, and this other area might be a huge risk where you may ultimately fail and fall on your face, but you have to be willing to face that and go after that, so that, because you never know what you could discover. I mean, like Jared and I always talk about this, you just never know, right? And it's those 4 words, you just never know. So you go and John Berryman, one of my favorite American poets, he says, travel in the direction of your fear, and so and that's that's pretty typical, I think, for a lot of people who have that entrepreneur sort of mindset. It's like, it's a challenge. It's like, if that scares me, then I should probably go do it. I mean, there are certain things that scare me that I will not do, like sky jumping, horseback riding, and whitewater rafting. I just have no desire to do any of those, right? But because I feel like there's enough challenge in my life already that I don't have to go prove myself in those situations. But as a writer, it's being having your eyes, observing, figuring out what are people doing, how do they look. And then just figuring out figuring out what you need to do in order to not look like them. And so someone says, man, whenever I see, your content, whenever I get an email from you, a headline, I know it's you without even, seeing the author. And so that's ultimately what you're after. And so when you start hearing those things, you go, okay, I'm on to something. And so pursue that and follow that, and continue to, expand and build upon that.
So you want to know a really great indicator of when you've achieved exactly what Demian is talking about is, I basically stole the headline of this show from, look, I follow, I'm a big fan of Damian's work, so I look at a lot of his headlines, and I basically created it off of his work. And then Joey Giangola, who has his own show, just said, Demian, that's a great headline. And I was like, wait a minute, I wrote that headline. You thought it was good. And I think that that is just a testament to your ability, to exactly what you're saying, to persevere, to continue to stand out. Your ability to write headlines stands out so much that I wrote a headline that sounded like you, and Julie thought it was yours.
Thank you.
Pretty incredible thing. So, all right. So
Yeah,
back
thank you.
on source here. You've said a whole bunch of stuff that I want to dive into. The first is the idea of looking like everyone else. So you wouldn't be able to tell this by my physical appearance, as I have a very kind of, if this was the 60s, you would call me a square haircut, wearing a gray shirt.
Yeah.
You know, but I am afflicted by the same thing. It's like this, the worst. I have a really hard time standing or sitting in crowds. Because like I don't want to be grouped in with other people, right? Like I will, and when I'm at conferences, I stand in the back, and I don't mean that to say that that's the right thing to do. I think it's probably some sort of strange psychosis, but
Right.
is that looking like everyone else thing? You know, the word that I wrote down was curiosity.
Yeah.
You think that having this curiosity, one, is a big part of this, of getting to not looking like everyone else, and two, for those people who would say, I don't have a natural curiosity, is there a way to cultivate that?
That's a good question. So, like, one of the reasons why I never really worked too well, like in the corporate sort of bureaucratic world, was that because of that curiosity was, I kind of wanted to know. So, a command, mandate, objective, whatever was handed down, and it's like, okay, that's cool, man. So why are we going to do that, right? So what's the point behind that? So when you work at somewhere where it's top-down control and command type thing, that doesn't fit in very well. But it is because, and I get in trouble with my wife too, because she'll say something, and I'll say, no, what does that mean? Why are you saying that? What's the point behind that? And it's like, I get in trouble because she thinks I'm challenging her. No, I'm just curious. I'm really honestly curious, and I have to apologize. And part of it's my tone, because I know that I can come across as being aggressive and passionate, but so it is that curiosity, because you want to know. It's just like you're interested in seeing something, and it's like, and so the people that, and not to say that there is anything fundamentally wrong with yes people. That's not me. The yes people want to, are rule based, and they want to follow it, and they feel comfortable in that atmosphere. I don't feel comfortable, and I hate being that way, and I feel like I'm being hamstrung. But it is, and so. Yeah, I think you can sort of cultivate that curiosity. It's going to be much harder, and the first step, obviously, is to recognize I'm not being curious. I'm just sort of, feeling comfortable, and I'm finding myself just sort of, losing myself into the folds because it's security, because it's, whatever. And you say, okay, well, why is that? And then, and then step out. And so the first step is to that curiosity, is being aware of who you are. And I think that is a lot of, like, you talk about self-improve, we talk about, who we are. It's about knowing who we are. It's identifying who we are and being self-aware and recognizing, being conscious of our thoughts and what are we saying and why are we saying those types of things. And so when we know those, then we can change our behavior if we don't like it, because, I have obvious hang-ups too that I need to be aware of, and it's usually somebody else pointing them out in those blind spots. So, if curiosity is not your strong suit, I think you can overcome it, just by recognizing it first, and then I don't know, read a good book on curiosity. It's one of those things, I'm not sure how you teach, but just observing. It starts with being aware of who you are, then observing.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that that if you are self-aware enough to understand that maybe you're not being curious enough about things, you can build that into your workflow, because I think simply asking the question why creates a habit of being curious. Simply asking. I asked a question. It's funny you have the example about your wife. I have the same exact, literally to a key, or to a point issue where my wife will say da, 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 and I'll say, well, why? And then she'll think that I'm challenging her, and I'm probably sure a lot of the spouses out there are thinking the same thing. This isn't about couples therapy. This is about marketing. So we'll move on. All right. So you're talking about. So I hear you breaking down people into, and this is a broad generalization for purposes of conversation, not because everyone can fit in these two boxes, but people who tend to ask why, and people who tend to say yes, okay, I'll do that thing. You said to do it, and I'll do it. One thing that I like to push back on not push back on, but just talk further on this particular topic is the fact people who aren't inclined to ask why. They're more of the technical. I think that for an organization to stand out, you need to have both, right? Because I am horrible at details. Horrible. Details are not my specialty. So if I were to be given a detailed task, that task would fail. So how do these people work together? Because I know a lot of people are listening to this are on both sides of that fence, and I'd love to get your thoughts on how you work with maybe some of the more technical side people.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I know in no means disparage those people, because like I tell, I have, what I do is only one function of what we do, or what we all do, and it's cliche, but it's teamwork, it's support, and so we need those people. But so I'm sorry, what was your question again?
That's all right. How do the more
work together?
Why people work with to get an organization to stand out? How do those people? Because I'm sure inside Copyblogger as an organization, there are both. And how do you guys work together?
That's great. Yeah. So that reminds me of like Peter Drucker. So just probably the guru of modern marketing. He said that culture will beat strategy. Every time. So it's that idea of like, you could have it, you could not have it, you could have a terrible strategy, you could not have a strategy at all, but if you have a great culture of mindsets, and so I think that's what it comes is like, it's a meeting of the minds, like where people who are, who want to put their weight behind the same sort of cause, something bigger than themselves, and get behind that cause. Your diversity then doesn't really matter that much. I mean, it matters in the sense that there won't be conflict, and then people will respect your discipline, because I understand, like when I talk about a Copyblogger, we're just a bunch of misfits who are looking for meaningful work, and if you look at like across the 42 plus people we have there, that's what you see, a bunch of people who are sort of unemployable in some way, but who really want to do meaningful work, and so we found that in Copyblogger. And so at that, when you know that there's something bigger that you are fighting for, there's something bigger that you're working for, those small little petty differences that come on are just that, small petty differences that you can ignore. If someone is particularly abrasive or is not abrasive, they just want they want something and want it now, and that's their job, and that's how they are. It's just like, hey, she's doing her job, and I appreciate her doing her job. So it comes to honoring that discipline, and like they honor our discipline. They say, we hear it all the time. We love our writers, but I'm like, I love our support people. They're doing God's work, and and I couldn't do that, and so, but it's honoring that discipline, and you recognize it. And so when there's a larger cause and there's a culture that's built around going towards that cause, and that's ultimately what stands out. It's that culture that you see these people, because we only see each other like 2 or 3 times a year, but we did, and I saw this most particularly back at Authority Intensive last year, is this like, we just want to make this one thing happen. And so when that's it, people just like are selfless, right? And so I think that's how you stand above as an organization and a culture.
Yeah, I love that, and I completely agree with you. It's like when you have that, and I had never heard that culture beats strategy, though. I mean, it makes complete sense to me immediately, because it's kind of like, and you have conversations instead of arguments, right? I mean, that's what these things are, is that differing opinions end up being conversations, not arguments, because ultimately you're trying to travel in the same direction, where arguments seem to be when people are trying to travel in different directions and have different motives. So, and you can tell the organizations that have this, because they do stand out. So, all right, so the next kind of idea that I want to toss at you and see if you can knock out of the park here is the word authenticity, which I, at one point, like the idea of what it means, I am 100% in tune with and believe in, but the word, like maybe just because so many people have used it in ways that make me feel slimy, I don't know.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like it's the kind of word where people kind of like, ugh. But at the same time, I feel like the concepts that its core concepts are really so important to standing out in the space.
Yeah, I think authentic is really just, it's another way of saying be yourself, and that, again, that's kind of cheesy, and but it's true though, right? I mean, it's true in the sense that you should be yourself, because really, speaking as being a writer, it's like you're trying to develop your voice, and your voice is like the Demian Farnworth is coming out of that writing, instead of, because like just using that metaphor as a writer early on. you copy all your favorites, and so you sound like a mini Brian Clark or a mini, Seth Godin or something like that. Eventually, though, you recognize, because people point it out to you, or you do it yourself, but you realize that you need to start, stand up for yourself, be yourself, relax, show us something that something more, because of course, imitation is a form of flattery, but it's also a sure way to mediocrity, right? And so you have to sort of kind of rise above that and just really, who is it that you are? And Jared and I have talked about this before, and it was one of those podcasts that we did. Authenticity can be abused in that sense of where people say, well, if you can't take the truth, then maybe you shouldn't be listening to me. And people want to be authentic in that way. And that's just like not what we're talking about. And if you are a jerk, it's probably not a good thing that you want to be authentic, and you probably need to change, because no one really appreciates an authentic jerk. And I know some people get away with it, some celebrities, but nobody wants to be personal friends with them. Nobody, you won't get any work done with those types of people. So, who it is, letting yourself shine through, and those are all kind of just warm, fuzzy terms that make me, want to vomit. But it's really just about, that's what it's about. It's just kind of, it's nailing that voice and nailing. When I talk to Ryan Hanley, I know who Ryan Hanley is because of the things he says, how he says them, his posture, his attitude, his approach. It's all those things that sort of define who you are, up against somebody else. When you have the police blotter thing, and you stand these people up, the differences and stuff like that.
Yeah. So being authentic, if you're going to be in a police blotter, might not be the best thing to be in that case. You want to know. Yeah, so I'll give you a case in point on where this comes from. This question comes from is thankfully, thank goodness, and whatever gods you believe in. Yesterday, I finished the manuscript to my book. I finished the manuscript to Kind of Warfare, and I delivered it to my editor. So in putting that together, I read almost every one of the 500 blog posts I've ever written, right? So you want to make sure you're not missing ideas and key concepts and all that kind of stuff, and going back and getting tone on different topics, the way I'd written about them, and just when I look at the early stuff and the way that I wrote, it was exactly what you were saying. It was, I read this blog post, and then whether I meant to or not, because I wasn't in tune with what the thing was that I created, it sounded like something else. And then as you can almost see this progression happening, and I think it works into, so my point here is it works into one of the very first things that you said in our conversation was the idea of perseverance, right? To be this, to have this standout brand, have this standout feel for your work, it is going to take time. So how do you get to that point? How did you get to it in your own work that, day one, I know you've been a writer for a long time and have done poetry and done a lot of different stuff, and you can talk about that, but how do people get to that point? Like, I feel like it's just because I'm hard-headed and I have a lot of Irish in me, and like I just I'll just bang my head off the wall for an hour, but not everyone has that. So what are some things that people can do?
So, yeah, I think the thing is, you talk about one of it is recognizing what you do, right? That you enjoy this when you sit down, because I was probably 25 before I realized that I like to write and I could make a living out of this, right? So, but at that point I realized that I had a predisposition to it, that I felt comfortable doing it. I got some compliments with it. So for those people out there who are just saying, I don't know what I'm good at, those are some signals when you do something and people commenting about you or you feel comfortable doing, those are some signals that you can key into. But so once you figure that out, and for me it's just like I had this natural disposition to go down this path as a writer. I said the most natural, with that talent, the most natural response to that talent, the sort of gratitude out of that is just to be the best that you possibly can be. And if you enjoy it, really, it comes down, if you enjoy it and you would do it if you're getting paid or not getting paid, then if it took you 5 months or 50 years to get to a point of mastery, you wouldn't care as long as you just got to do that one thing. And so that's what it ultimately came down for me, was just I get to do this, I get to do this thing. It started off in smaller chunks because I had I was working in a warehouse before that, so I had that job, but then I had to write on the side. But then you make small decisions that nudge you in the right direction you want to go, and eventually find yourself in a place of doing that full time, and so you're working on it more and more, And ultimately, it took me 5 or 6 years before I got it, before I understood it, before I felt comfortable in, my skin as a writer. And then another probably, 5 years before I was like, okay, like I'm getting recognition for this. Like people actually want to pay me good money to do this, and so it. But if you enjoy doing that, then it really shouldn't be, because I always look back. It's just like, I could publish a book, but really, I enjoy the process so much that I resist the publication part, because I feel like sometimes that would spoil it or soil it. Not to say that I would never publish a book, but again, it's like you learned, it's hard work too. So it's but it is that, and so honoring that gift that you've been getting is by becoming the best you can. If you're comfortable in doing it, you will, you really won't have any, because that's the question that I ask. The other thing too is, who you are and what you will sort of end up will evolve through time. I'm sure you probably recognized with your own brand is that you started off with one thing in mind, you're going to do this, but you have mid-course corrections and you end up somewhere else, and you're like, okay, I really didn't see that coming, but that's who you are. And the other thing too is, I had this epiphany a couple of months ago, this idea that each article that I write is kind of really what's behind that is 1,000 books, 10,000 articles, 100 podcasts I've listened to it. And the article may only be 100 words long, but it's all that experience. And so as I kind of progress, as you progress down your personal development, your accumulation of experience and knowledge will grow. And so that's all feeds into who you are and what you are, so you naturally just get better at it, and that evolves and develops who you are too. So you change. We talk about identity, and who I was 20 years ago is not who I am. It'd be a stranger in a sense, but if you're comfortable in your skin, then you'll have no problem going down that path. It takes time. I say perseverance, but it's also patience.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great word too. How happy were you the day you realized you didn't have to work in a warehouse anymore and you could write for a living?
Yeah, I was pretty stoked. It was good. It was really, it was a great feeling, because I thought I would be stuck in a warehouse, and that's just what I did. And that being a writer was something that happened. Being a paid writer was something that happened to somebody else. So yeah, I was really stoked.
Yeah. Okay, so we're persevering, we understand, we're starting to develop our voice, we're feeling good, things are going well, and something I know happens to both in the straight business sense, and if people are just kind of developing their personal brand, is they start to see success in an area. You write an article and it gets a lot of shares, right? It may not be your favorite thing, but you're getting feedback on that thing, and what you do is you gravitate towards this thing that you're getting attention on, but isn't necessarily who you are or what you want to be. How do you, and I guess this is really more of an open question, I'll let you take it where you want, but it's more of a scenario of you find yourself being pulled in a direction that is getting attention, but isn't ultimately what you want your brand business to be. How do you handle that situation? Do you allow that path to happen, or do you try to pull it back, or I just kind of like your thoughts on that idea.
Yeah, I think at some point when I've been in situations where, actually, when I got into, when I started working for myself, I got into the ghostwriting business because it was abundant and it paid, and it paid well. But about 8 months in, it's like, I do not want to be doing this anymore. And it's just like, but it was a huge part of my income, and I was just like, I got to figure out a way how to get out of this, because I'm not having fun at all, and it's like this is not how I want to do it. And so I guess it comes to when you find yourself in that situation, you got to have the courage and say no. I can't do this. This is not who I am, because if you dread what you're doing, if that's not who you are, and if you lose the joy of it, and that's what was happening. As a writer, I was getting paid to write, and these people were like, "Well, I don't understand. We're paying you good money." And it's like, yeah, but it's just I don't enjoy what I'm writing about, and how I'm doing it. And so you just gotta have the courage to say no. I'm done. You figure out an exit plan from that, an exit plan that works from you, and get your work your way out of that, because yeah, you have to figure your way out, because otherwise it will ruin for you what you found so precious.
Yeah, it's almost like you have to give yourself permission to maybe not necessarily hit the reset button, but
yeah.
It's almost like when you first get in this game. Okay, so I'm going to restate a couple of things you said here. When you first get into this game, you feel like whatever direction you take is the direction that you're going to be on for the next 30 years of your creating career, right? Like, so if
Right.
you don't create and you're listening to this show, this might not make sense to you, but I know when my fingers first hit the keyboard, I fell in love with it.
Yeah.
Today, not that I don't love writing, I do, but this is the thing that if you took away from me, I would be distraught.
Yeah.
That
Right.
when I first started, I would never think that, never. And it's almost like you have to give yourself permission to evolve, kind of, right?
Yeah, I think you have to. We talked about this, earlier too. That idea of being self-aware and saying when you notice your emotions are low, or your energy is flagging or something like that over a period of time, that you have to be self-aware and say, okay, something's not right here. What is it? What's not right? And you can even make, a big word in like, the startup culture is pivot. You're learning how to pivot. Okay, you're going a certain direction, and that's right. Is like you pointed out, is that because you're going down a certain path doesn't mean you're committed to it. Just learn to, you might have to pivot in some ways, and you can even, it may not be a macro pivot, but a micro pivot. Because even like I love what I do for Copyblogger, but sometimes I'm so immersed in content marketing, the topic and stuff like that. I just kind of like, God, I need something else to do, something else other than just this. And so I recognize I have to step back from that, and I'm not very good at taking vacation time. I'm not very good at taking time off. But and I have this sort of Protestant work ethic where it's just like I feel guilty if I'm not working, and so. But you have to be careful with that and to say, okay, well, I need something to be doing something else. It sort of takes my mind off that work and refreshes it, and it's healthy. It's from a creative standpoint, it's healthy. So you need to do that. But yeah, giving yourself permission is exactly what you need to do.
Yeah. So so that kind of takes us into I would like to dive into a little more tactical in a sense, not maybe 1,000 feet, but maybe like 10,000 feet.
Sure.
And kind of working off of what you just said, I'm a big fan of pulling in two concepts that may be quasi-related and turning them into one thing, right? So for me, and that's obvious based on the vertical that I work in, that's insurance, right? So I'm able to pull in insurance and marketing, and that's how I kind of stand out from maybe my peers, is that I have these, I can speak these two languages.
Right.
What should people be looking for in context? Like, is that a good tactic, one? And two, let's start to talk maybe some 10,000-foot tactical things that can help, that can maybe spur some ideas on people that they can use to stand out in their own work.
Right. So I think that what you said is that idea of, I mean, really, it's how we come to original ideas when we take two disparate things and we put them together. And so what helps for me, from a copywriting standpoint, we talk about a copywriter has to know, like, has two sorts of knowledge, right? They have a specific knowledge and they have a general knowledge. A specific knowledge is like about a particular, it's about their discipline in copywriting. But if they're working on a particular project, let's say car insurance or something like that, car insurance for the San Diego area or something like that. So they have to have specific knowledge about that. But they bring into that a general knowledge to get to the point where they do stand out, or they have something that is meaningful, yet is different and is useful. So when I talk about general knowledge, is meaning being interested in a lot of in a lot of things. Like most copywriters you meet can amaze you with they may not be experts in 1,000 subjects, but they know a lot. They'll know a superficial level of 1,000 things. But with that, they bring in that experience, and they bring in that knowledge to that sort of liveness. So they say, hey, you know what? And, like, for example, here's a great point. So I was trying to figure out, when I was working on a Google authorship series a couple of years ago, I was looking for a common theme to run through them. And it came through just from some random reading of about Hunter S. Thompson, the gonzo journalist who wrote Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. And I merged those two together, which makes what was a pretty mundane topic become rise above the noise. And so it's having that general knowledge. And so it could be as simple as just being going on Netflix TV binges. It's watching documentaries. It's reading fictional novels. It's reading ancient literature. It's reading it's really having learning what a botanist does, how a botanist spends his day, learning how a psychologist spends his day. being very interested in a lot of different subjects, I think, gets you to that point where you're able to say, okay, here's X, I marry Y, I equal Z out of that. And like Brian Clark, he's a great example of this, because when he started Copyblogger, he was, and I ran across him. He was not teaching me and a lot of other people nothing new, nothing we already didn't know from Bob Lai, from Dan Kennedy, and all these people like that. Yet what he did is he brought 80s punk music into it, and like, hey, this is cool. I can relate to this. I appreciate this. It makes actually what he's talking about a lot more interesting. So it's really about being having a personality outside of just your own discipline. Because I think we've all met those sort of people who are like experts in their field, but they're like like kind of a cardboard cutout, and you don't want to be that way.
Yeah, so my two big inspirations, and I'm sharing this only because I find it interesting, and I love that you brought up the 80s punk, are 90s gangster rap. Again, square haircut, gray shirt, I can't help it, 90s gangster rap, huge fan. And high fantasy and sci-fi novels, and high fantasy is like knights and stuff, not porno, just for everyone who's listening. But for some reason, those are the two topics that when I start to feel stuck, I read some sort of trash science fiction book that you can fly through in a few days, and you come up with some crazy idea, or when rap actually involved lyrics and not just hooks. It was really, there's some really inspirational stuff in there. So I encourage everyone who's listening to this now, or who's watching now, or listening in the future, think about this. This is really kind of guts of I think what makes Demian's work so great is that Hunter S. Thompson article is one of my favorites that you've ever written, for this reason, right? Like, you took this movie that I had watched, 10 years earlier, and knew of him as the writer and different stuff, and you put it into Google Plus, which is something that I had a current interest in, and I was hooked immediately. I was like, I have to find out what this is about. Like, that just brought me in immediately. So think about these things and draw these things, guys. This is really good stuff. Okay, so let's go all the way back to the very, very beginning, because we're talking a little more technical now, and let's talk a little bit about your repurposing strategy. Again, 10,000 feet, not we don't have to get all the way to the nuts and bolts, but just give us an idea of how you use repurposing to kind of stand out as an organization in your content.
Okay, so as a philosophy, just the theory behind repurposing is that you should understand that you will lose. There's a high turnover in your audience. Like, for every, I don't know if there's exact numbers out there, but every 2 years you could almost guarantee like a 50%, maybe more turnover, because people either get bored with it, they find something shiny out there, they move on, whatever, or there's new people coming into the industry, old people leaving. So there's always that turnover. So this is what we talk about. Cornerstone content or evergreen content, meaning like the fundamentals of what you do will never go out of style. And the problem that this can cause is what they call the curse of knowledge. It's like we always way overestimate what the knowledge of we think our audience knows. But you have to remember, you have to assume absolutely nothing about your audience. Imagine they're starting from the very beginning, and you will be really surprised. And it's like Darren Rouse is a great example of this when he talks about digital photography, and he was thinking about how the correct way to handle how you hold a camera. He's thinking, this is just too basic, and he decided to go with it anyway. And it's his most popular blog post because of that. It's basic, it's fundamental. It's because people don't know. Most people don't know, and so that's the theory and the philosophy you have to start behind it, is understand that most people don't know as much as you do, and even if you think you do, then you need to underestimate even further. So that's the theory, and so then what that just means is, like, so if you create, and so inside Copyblogger we kind of have this philosophy of creating the asset pillar, which is typically a infographic, and an asset pillar is just it's a piece of content that serves as sort of like a magnet. So like we created that once, but from out of that radiates all these different kinds of content. So we created an infographic we created the infographic for the 11 ingredients that every blog post needs. We then from that radiated and we created the podcast, repurposing content. We came with some new things to add to that, but the same thing. We dig back into our archives, find, okay, there's 4 or 5 or 6 articles that are related to that. Let's make a podcast out of it. Let's make a infographic out of that. A few months down the road, let's make a slideshow out of that. A few days down the road, a few months down the road, let's make a podcast out of that. A few days down the road, you could do something with LinkedIn. You can repurpose content on Medium. So it's not only just on your site, but also you can republish content. You can take something like you wrote about in the past, you can bring it forward and rewrite it or update it. That's repurposing it. Or you can take something that's hot on your site and repurpose it, sort of like on different, Facebook, on different mediums, and like the platform Medium, like Facebook, like LinkedIn, like Google+. You can repurpose content that way, and it all it brings old ideas to new people, and it broadens your audience too.
Yeah. One of the things I love that you do, and I know that you handle the Google Plus page for Copyblogger, or at least you did. I don't know if you still do. Okay. Is you'll take an article and you'll share it, and you'll have kind of the introductory breakout in the post section, and then maybe I'll see a week later or a month later or however, a period of time later, you'll share that article. But I think where most people make the mistake is they'll share the exact same intro and introduction and thoughts, and you'll give it a little different spin the second time you put it out there, maybe taking a different piece inside, and it's like that little. It seems like you're just sharing. The thought is, well, I'm just resharing it to Google+, but the point is, someone may have connected with it, or may not have connected with the first share, but that second share, the way you worded something or the topic that you brought out, that's what connects them and draws them in. Right. And I think I think Joey, we talked about Joey Giangola's comment here is perfect. Demian Farnworth and Copyblogger's repurposing ability will forever make me feel like half a man. For continuing to be an awesome part of this show. And I want to thank Paul Allen. She pulled out the actual article that we referenced a couple times and put them in the comment stream. And I also want to thank Paula for her comment earlier. I'm not going to read it on the show, though, because it makes me seem a lot cooler than I actually am. But I do appreciate you pulling that article out, Paula. We're about 45 minutes into this show, 40 minutes into the show. We've given some really deep insights into standing out. We've given 2 kind of very specific targeted strategies. So, and that being pull in different topics and repurposing. What would be maybe one more strategic thing that someone could use to stand out? It doesn't have to be incredibly deep, but just something that people should have in the back of their mind when they're creating content as a way to stand out.
That's great. So I always kind of talk about I would call it the David Ogilvy sort of eye patch sort of phenomenon. Like we know David Ogilvy, and he created some really great ads. But what he was also sort of at par excellence was an art director too. And so the Hathaway shirt man was this man was an ad for shirts, right? And so we know that men's shirts are pretty much a commodity, right? And so everybody was creating them. It's not like Hathaway was, I believe, like at the bottom of the market. So, but what David Ogilvy was created this persona, and he put a guy in a shirt, but then he put the eye patch on it, and since then we've seen manifestations of this through Dostoevsky's Most Interesting Man in the World, and also sort of a comic variation of that was Old Spice's Smell Like a Man kind of series, but variations off that. So so I say all that, and as a person, you can draw attention to yourself just from your sort of physical features, right? So I wear my hair long because my wife likes it that way, and I would much prefer to keep it short. But I also recognize that when I go somewhere, I am the only guy in the room with long hair, and so that's easy to stand out. Joe Paluzzi, we mentioned earlier, I believe he wears, is it orange shoes or orange jackets?
Orange, all kinds of stuff, I think. I think it's just orange, orange.
Yeah, orange. So he is the orange guy. And I think it's, who is that guy at Moz? Gosh, I know him.
Rand, with a mustache.
Yeah, the mustache, right? He's a mustache, and early on he used to wear very, very unique Pumas, and so people knew him. So it's that sort of idea of creating some sort of persona that people recognize. And I mean, Lady Gaga is someone who has taken that to the exact extreme, because the danger that you can have is like where people pay attention to who you are and not what you do, and that's not what you want to do, because then eventually you become sort of this comic figure who's not a great musician, and I'm not saying that about Lady Gaga, but
yeah,
I'm saying that could occur to me if we tried to make ourselves this character. So it's all I always focus on just creating the best headline, creating the best article. At the same time, like, how can I differentiate myself? Easy. Look at all of the everyone's Twitter avatars, and okay, how can I create a Twitter avatar that stands out from that, right?
Yep.
Look at everyone's Google Plus avatar, and how can I create an avatar that's different than that? And so that's that sort of thing. So looking for that sort of eye patch moment.
Yeah. Looking for the eye patch moment. That's the meat and potatoes of this. And I wish I had named the show "Looking for the How Do You Find Your Eye Patch Moment." That would have been amazing. Wow.
There you go.
Only I had known, but my crystal ball didn't tell me you were going to say that. But now I'm very happy that you did. So
awesome.
We started from the beginning saying I was going to get something out of Demian that I hadn't expected, and getting him to say "Look for your eye patch moment" was that thing.
Awesome.
All right, well, dude, this has been a blast. We've hit on a ton of really great stuff. As always, I have my page full of notes here that I'm taking because I'm getting free consulting time out of a world-class copywriter, so I might as well take notes. Dude, where can people find you and your work and connect with you deeper?
So first off, go to copyblogger.com, and that's the company that I work for, Copyblogger Media. Check out our blog, copyblogger.com. You can check out all the articles that I wrote by going to copyblogger.com/Demian Farnworth, or just searching for Demian Farnworth. Or you can go to my blog, the Copybot, COPYBOT.com. That's my personal professional blog, and of course on Twitter or Google Plus. So.
Yeah, and I encourage everyone to check both places out. So I'm a fan of Copybloggers, but I also am a subscriber to Demian's The Copybot site as well. And it's funny, it's almost like the Copybot is the little pieces that fill in the gaps between the larger Copyblogger articles, and I appreciate it for that. It really is great when we both kind of nerd out on this stuff, so that's why it's so interesting. But
well, I always tell Brian Clark, it's like, the Copybot is an extension of the Copyblogger. It's what I can't publish on it because of our scheduling restrictions. I like to write, so I need to put it somewhere, so it's there. So it's always just an extension of that. So. Yeah,
and there's a lot of gold nuggets in those hills, ladies and gentlemen. So
thank you.
Consider that. And so for everyone who's listening, anything that we described in the show, I'm going to have in the show notes, ryanhanley.com/show108. This is the 108th episode. Or if you're not lazy, you can just Google everything and go there directly. But you can always go to my site too and give me more web traffic, which is what everyone who has a website wants.
That's
so with that, Demian, thanks as always, dude. Absolutely fantastic. We're going to get out of here.
Thank you, man.